All right, let's do this. Today we are diving deep into Gary Keller's The One Thing. You guys sent in a ton of notes and research on this one.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's looking to boost their productivity, right?
Totally. And from everything we've seen, Keller's approach seems to really cut through all the typical productivity fluff.
It's a classic for a reason.
So the core idea here, right, is that focusing on just one thing at a time, like really zeroing in on it, is the key to achieving those extraordinary results we all want.
It's harder than it sounds, though.
Oh, for sure. So how do we even begin to do that in our world of constant distractions? Like, my phone is basically an extension of my hand at this point.
Well, that's where Keller's famous focusing question comes in.
Ah, yes, the focusing question. Everyone seems to be talking about this.
It sounds simple, but it's powerful.
Okay, remind us, what is it exactly?
It's, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
So it's not just about, like, making a to-do list. It's about finding that one linchpin task.
Exactly. That unlocks everything else.
I like that, the linchpin task.
And you can apply it to any area of your life, like your career, your relationships, your health.
In the research you sent, there was a great example of someone using it to decide between, like, launching a side business or focusing on getting a promotion at work.
Yes. It helped them prioritize what would have the biggest long-term impact.
So it's like a decision-making filter
Exactly. It helps you cut through all those shoulds and coulds.
to get to the mstido.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, so that's the focusing question.
And then that leads us to the domino effect,
Okay.
another key concept from the book.
Okay, tell me more.
It's the idea that small, focused actions can build upon one another and lead to some really remarkable results over time.
So, like, one domino knocking down another, knocking down
Yeah,
another.
exactly. One tiny flick can topple a whole line of dominoes.
So the trick is figuring out which domino to flick first, right?
Right. You need to understand that success is built sequentially.
Not by doing everything at once?
No.
Makes sense.
Right.
So, like, if you're trying to write a novel,
Yeah.
that first domino might be writing 1,000 words every day.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good visual.
It's all about those consistent actions.
Building momentum over time.
Absolutely. But there are a lot of myths and misconceptions around productivity that can trip us up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Like what?
Keller calls them the 6 lies.
The 6 lies. Ooh, this sounds juicy.
And they're really common traps we all fall into.
Okay, lay 'em on me. What's the first lie?
Well, the first one is the idea that everything matters equally.
Oh, I can see how that would be a problem.
It leads to overwhelm.
Scattered effort.
Right. You've got to prioritize.
Focus on those vital few tasks that really matter.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's lie number 1, debunked. What's next?
Lie number 2 is that multitasking works.
Oh, man. That's a tough one to let go of.
I know, right?
Like, I feel like I'm always multitasking.
But it actually makes us less efficient
Really?
and more prone to making mistakes.
Huh. That's interesting.
Our brains just aren't wired to focus on multiple things at once.
So, single tasking is the way to go.
Yes. Focus your full attention on one task at a time.
Okay, I can get behind that. Probably reduces stress too, right?
Totally.
All right, multitasking debunked. What's lie number 3?
This one might surprise you. A disciplined life is key.
Wait, hold on. Isn't discipline, like, essential for success?
It is important, but Keller's point is that relying solely on willpower is not sustainable.
Oh, interesting. Because we only have so much willpower each day.
Exactly, and it gets depleted quickly.
So instead of constantly forcing ourselves to be disciplined, we need a better strategy
Yes. It's about building habits and routines that support our goals.
so that those actions become more automatic.
Exactly.
Makes sense. It's
Yeah.
about working smarter, not harder.
You got it. Which leads us to lie number 4, which is willpower is always available.
But as we just discussed, it's a finite resource.
Exactly. It's like a muscle that gets tired with overuse.
So, gotta be strategic about when we tackle those really demanding tasks.
Right. Keller suggests tackling your one thing first thing in the morning.
When your willpower is at its peak.
Yes. Save those less demanding tasks for later in the day.
Makes sense. All right, 2 more lies to go. Hit me.
Number 5. A balanced life is best.
But isn't work-life balance something we should all be striving for?
It's a worthy goal, but Keller argues that achieving extraordinary results often requires intentional imbalance.
Intentional imbalance. Explain that.
He compares it to a pendulum that swings back and forth between different areas of your life.
So there will be times when, say, work demands more focus, And then other times when family or personal stuff takes priority.
Exactly. It's about counterbalancing, not trying to do everything equally all the time.
That's a refreshing perspective. Okay, last lie. Lay it on me.
The sixth lie is that big is bad.
Big is bad. Why would we fear thinking big?
Well, sometimes it's because we're afraid of failing, or maybe just feeling overwhelmed.
Right, those big goals can feel daunting.
But Keller believes that having those big, audacious goals is essential for growth.
So embrace those dreams, even if they seem kind of scary at first.
Absolutely. They're what push us to achieve more than we ever thought possible.
Okay, love that.
Yeah.
So we've debunked all 6 lies of productivity.
Right. Yeah.
What's next?
Now let's talk about how to put all of this into practice.
Yes. Give me the actionable steps.
Keller calls it the success habit.
Okay, I like it already. Tell me more.
It's a framework for turning those someday goals into actionable steps.
Right, break it down for me. Where do we start?
With your someday goal, that big ultimate dream you might have, like, I don't know, writing a book, starting a business.
Okay, so visualize that goal, that dream.
Yes. And then you work backward,
Looking backward.
breaking it down into smaller
This
milestones.
is like a 5-year goal.
Exactly. Then a 1-year goal, monthly goals, weekly goals, daily goals, and ultimately your right now goal.
It's like creating a roadmap, but in reverse.
Yes. With each milestone leading you closer to that ultimate destination.
That's such a great visual. And having those goals written down helps to keep them top of mind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes them more real, more tangible.
Okay, but even with a clear plan and all the right goals, there are still obstacles, right? Those things that just get in the way.
Oh, yeah.
Keller talks about those, right?
Yes. He calls them the 4 thieves of productivity.
Ooh, the 4 thieves. This is I gotta hear.
These are those culprits that steal our time and energy.
Okay, who are these thieves?
Well, the first one is the inability to say no.
Oh, that's me. I am so bad at saying no.
It's a common one. We feel obligated to say yes to everything.
Even when it means, like, sacrificing our own priorities.
Exactly.
It's like we're afraid of disappointing people or missing out.
It's a powerful force.
But learning to say no is so important.
It's crucial. You need to protect your time and energy so you can focus on what matters.
Setting boundaries, I hear you. Okay, who's thief number 2?
The fear of chaos.
The fear of chaos. I wouldn't have guessed that one. How does that steal our productivity?
Well, we often resist change and we cling to what's familiar, even if it's not really working for us anymore.
So, like, we stay stuck in our routines even if they're not serving us?
Exactly. But Keller argues that a little bit of chaos is actually necessary for growth.
So stepping outside of our comfort zone is actually a good thing.
It is. That's where the magic happens.
I love it. Okay, who's next?
Thief number 3 is poor health habits.
Okay, that one's pretty self-explanatory.
Right. We can't be productive if we're not taking care of ourselves.
So getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising, all of that.
Exactly. Those habits fuel our energy and focus.
So we can show up as our best selves.
Yes. It all ties together.
Okay, last thief. Let's hear it.
This one is an environment that doesn't support your goals.
Interesting. So if you're surrounded by distractions
Yeah.
or negativity,
We're people who don't believe in your goals.
yeah, that would definitely make it harder to succeed.
It would.
So what's the solution?
Create an environment that is conducive to achieving your goals.
So, like, declutter your workspace.
Yes.
Set boundaries with people who drain your energy.
Yes.
Surround yourself with positive, supportive people.
Exactly. It's all about being intentional with your surroundings.
Love it. Okay, so we've identified the 4 thieves of productivity, but how do we actually defeat them? Like, what are the practical strategies?
Well, Keller provides some really specific tips for each one.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
To overcome the inability to say no, he suggests creating a not-to-do list.
A not-to-do list.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Right. It's a list of tasks that you consciously choose not to do.
So you can free up your time and energy for the things that truly matter.
Exactly.
I love that. Instead of focusing on what we need to add, we can be strategic about what we subtract.
Exactly. And when it comes to the fear of chaos, Keller encourages us to reframe our perspective.
Okay, how so?
Instead of viewing chaos as something to avoid, view it as a sign that you're stretching yourself, that you're growing.
So embrace the mess.
Sometimes, yeah. It's often in those messy, chaotic moments that the most creative ideas and breakthroughs emerge.
I can definitely see that. What about poor health habits? What's the antidote for that one?
The key is to prioritize self-care. Make it a non-negotiable part of your routine.
So treat your well-being as an investment in your productivity.
Exactly. And finally, for an environment that doesn't support your goals, it's about being proactive
Proactive in what way?
in shaping your surroundings.
So choose to spend time in spaces that inspire you.
Yes. Surround yourself with people who lift you up and encourage you.
Okay, I'm getting it. So create rituals and routines that support your goals, set boundaries with those energy vampires.
Yes. And choose your environment wisely.
This is all starting to come together. So far, we've covered the focusing question, the domino effect, the 6 lies, and the 4 thieves. What's next?
And don't forget the success habit.
Right, the success habits. Like we're building this amazing toolkit for achieving extraordinary results.
We are. And now let's talk about the power of time blocking.
Okay, time blocking. I've heard a lot about this. Is it really as effective as everyone says it is?
It can be a game changer.
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar, tell us what time blocking is.
It's a technique for being intentional with your time.
So like scheduling your day in blocks,
Yes, but it's more than that. It's about protecting those blocks of time.
especially for your one thing, right?
Exactly. Keller recommends blocking off a good chunk of time each day,
Like how much time are we talking here?
ideally 4 hours or more.
Wow, 4 hours. That's a big commitment.
It is. But the idea is to treat it like an unbreakable appointment with yourself.
4 hours of completely uninterrupted, focused work time.
Exactly. It's your flow state time.
I can see how that would lead to some major breakthroughs.
It can be amazing what you can accomplish when you have that kind of dedicated focus.
Okay, I'm sold on the idea, but like practically speaking, how do you make time blocking work in the real world?
Keller has some great tips. For example, he suggests scheduling your time block for the time of day when you're most productive.
That makes sense. Like I'm definitely a morning person, so I'd probably block off my time first thing in the morning.
Exactly. Figure out when your peak performance time is and schedule accordingly.
Okay, what else?
He also recommends creating a ritual around your time block.
A ritual,
Yeah, like setting up your workspace in a particular way.
or maybe having a special drink you only have during your time block.
Exactly. Or listening to specific music.
So the idea is to create a consistent routine that signals your brain that it's time to focus.
Exactly. And don't forget to communicate your time block to others.
Oh, right. That's crucial because interruptions are productivity killers.
Tell your colleagues, family, and friends that you're unavailable during that time.
Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries.
Exactly. Protect that sacred time.
Okay, got it. Create a ritual, communicate your boundaries, and carve out that sacred time for your one thing.
You got it. And remember, time blocking isn't just about getting more done. It's about doing the right things.
Aligning your actions with your priorities.
Exactly. And making progress towards those goals.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I'm curious to hear more about how this all ties together. Keller mentions 3 core principles: purpose, priority, and productivity.
Yes, these are the foundations of the one thing philosophy.
Okay, let's unpack them.
All right.
Starting with purpose. What does Keller have to say about that?
He really emphasizes knowing your why. What are you passionate about?
What impact do you want to make?
Exactly. Having that clear sense of purpose, it guides your decisions, keeps you motivated.
It's like having a compass that points you in the right direction.
Exactly. Once you know where you're going, it's a lot easier to figure out how to get there.
And that leads us to priority.
Right, which is where your one thing comes in.
It's about identifying that most important task, the one that'll move you closer to your goals.
And then giving it your full attention.
Okay, so purpose informs priority.
Yes, it's a logical progression.
But knowing your one thing is just the first step, right? We still have to actually take action.
Right, and that's where productivity comes in.
So consistently taking action
Day after day.
to make progress towards those goals.
Exactly. It's about showing up, putting in the work, and staying committed.
Even when things get tough.
Especially when things get tough.
It sounds like these 3 principles work together, almost like a feedback loop.
They do. Purpose gives you direction, priority helps you focus, and productivity keeps you moving forward.
They're all interconnected.
Exactly.
You know, in addition to all of this, you also send over some notes on what you called additional key principles.
Oh, yes. These expand on Keller's ideas even further.
And they touch on some really interesting concepts.
Yeah.
Like self-discipline, willpower, balance, and visualization.
Yeah, they really do. And they challenge some of our assumptions about productivity and success.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into these additional key principles.
Sounds good.
What's the first one that stands out to you?
The first one that really caught my eye is self-discipline is a myth.
Wait, a myth? Isn't discipline like the cornerstone of success?
That's what we're often told.
Yeah.
But Keller argues that relying solely on willpower is a recipe for failure.
So it's not about white-knuckling your way through it.
Nope. It's more about designing systems and routines that make it easier to stay on track.
So instead of forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do, you create an environment where it just naturally happens.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, what's the next principle?
This one ties in nicely with the first one. Willpower is a finite resource.
Right. We touched on this earlier when we were talking about the 6 lies.
It's like a muscle that gets tired with overuse.
So we have to use it wisely.
Exactly.
And one way to do that is to prioritize your most important tasks for those times when your willpower is strongest.
Which for many people is first thing in the morning.
Right. Okay, what's next?
The next one might surprise you. Embrace an imbalanced life.
Wait a minute. Isn't balance something we should all be striving for? Like that perfect work-life balance?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
It does.
But Keller argues that pursuing extraordinary results often requires periods of, well, intentional imbalance.
Intentional imbalance.
He uses this analogy of a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Sometimes it swings more towards work.
And sometimes more towards family or personal life.
Exactly. It's about counterbalancing, not neglecting any one area for too long.
That takes the pressure off.
It does, right?
Because who can actually achieve perfect balance all the time?
Exactly. Life is messy.
And unpredictable.
Exactly.
Okay, that one's a keeper. What's the last additional key principle?
This one is visualize the process, not just the outcome.
Ooh, I like that one. Sometimes I get so fixated on the end goal that I forget to enjoy the journey.
That's a common trap.
Yeah.
We get caught up in this fantasy of achieving our goals, but we neglect to visualize the actual work it takes to get there.
Right, like we imagine ourselves crossing the finish line.
But we don't picture all the steps it takes to get there.
So how do we change that?
Keller encourages us to break down our goals into those smaller steps, those mini milestones, and then visualize ourselves successfully completing each step.
So it's like creating a mental movie of the process.
Exactly. Focus on the actions you need to take to reach that outcome.
That makes so much sense. By visualizing the process, not just the outcome, we stay more motivated and, I'd imagine, less overwhelmed.
Exactly. It helps you stay focused on the present moment, on what you can do right now to move forward.
These additional principles really add a whole new dimension to the one thing philosophy.
They do. It's not just about productivity. It's about a more holistic approach to success.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
It has been.
I'm feeling inspired, and I bet our listeners are too.
I hope so.
So before we move on, I want to pose a question to our listeners.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about everything we've discussed today.
The focusing question, the domino effect, the 6 lies, the 4 thieves.
All of it. Now consider this. If you could only focus on one thing for the next month that would have the biggest positive impact on your life, what would it be?
That's a great question to reflect on.
Once you've identified your one thing, remember all the tools we've talked about today. The focusing question, time blocking, the 4 thieves.
It's about making a conscious choice to focus on what truly matters.
And then taking consistent action.
Exactly. You got this.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
But I believe our listeners now have the knowledge and the inspiration to apply these principles to their own lives.
Absolutely.
So to our listeners, we challenge you to embrace the power of the one thing.
And unlock your full potential.
Thanks for joining us in this incredible journey of discovery.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. So first, purpose, Keller. He really emphasizes knowing your why.
Like, what are you passionate about? What gets you fired up?
Exactly. And what impact do you want to make on the world? Having that clear sense of purpose.
Like your North Star.
It is. It guides your decisions, keeps you motivated when things get tough.
Okay, so you know your why, then what?
Then comes priority, and that's where your one thing comes in.
Right, figuring out the most important task.
The one that will move you closer to those big goals.
And giving it your undivided attention.
Exactly. Purpose informs priority. It's a natural progression. But, and here's the thing, knowing your one thing is only part of the equation, right? You still have to actually, do it.
Take action.
Yes. And that's where productivity comes in. It's about showing up every day, putting in the work, and staying committed to that one thing, even when, life throws you curveballs.
So it's like those 3 principles, purpose, priority, and productivity, they all work together.
They do. Purpose sets your direction, priority helps you focus, and productivity keeps you moving forward, making actual progress.
I like it. It's a system.
It is. And, speaking of systems, you sent over some notes on what you called additional key principles.
Oh, yeah. Those were some interesting concepts.
They really build on Keller's ideas.
And they get into some, like, almost controversial topics.
Right, like self-discipline, willpower, the idea of balance.
And visualization, which I'm always fascinated by.
Let's dive into those. I think our listeners will find them really thought-provoking.
Okay, what's the first one that jumps out at you?
Well, the one that really made me stop and think was self-discipline is a myth.
Wait, a myth? But isn't discipline like the key to, well, pretty much everything?
That's what we've always been told, right?
Yeah.
But Keller has a different perspective. He says that relying solely on willpower, like just forcing yourself to do things, it's not a sustainable strategy.
It's exhausting.
It is. And it sets you up for failure. Instead, he suggests focusing on building habits and routines.
So you're not constantly relying on willpower.
Exactly. Think of it as designing a system that supports your goals, rather than just trying to power through with sheer willpower.
I like that. Work smarter, not harder. Right.
Right. Which brings us to the next principle. Willpower is a finite resource. We talked about this a bit earlier with the 6 lies. Right?
Yeah, it's like willpower is a muscle that gets tired with overuse.
Exactly. So you have to use it strategically.
Don't waste it on things that don't really matter.
Right. And that means prioritizing those most important tasks for when your willpower is at its peak.
Which, for a lot of people, is first thing in the morning.
Exactly. Front load your day with your one thing while you're feeling fresh and focused. And speaking of balance, or, well, maybe the lack of it, the next principle might surprise you. Embrace an imbalanced life.
Now, that one threw me for a loop. Isn't balance like the holy grail? That perfect work-life balance everyone's always talking about?
I know it seems counterintuitive, right? But Keller argues that if you really want to achieve something extraordinary, you often need to embrace periods of, well, intentional imbalance.
Intentional imbalance.
He compares it to a pendulum swinging back and forth. Sometimes it swings more towards work, sometimes more towards family or personal life.
It's not about, like, neglecting any one area entirely, right?
No, it's about counterbalancing, recognizing that there will be seasons where different areas of your life require more of your attention.
It's like giving yourself permission to focus on what needs to be focused on at that moment.
Exactly. Life isn't static, it's constantly changing, and your focus will naturally shift along with it.
That's a very freeing way to think about it.
And it's a lot more realistic than striving for this mythical perfect balance all the time.
Okay, so we've got self-discipline is a myth, willpower is a finite resource, and embrace an imbalanced life. What's the last principle?
The last one is visualize the process, not just the outcome.
Oh, I love this one. I'm a very goal-oriented person, but sometimes I get so focused on the end result, like reaching that goal, that I forget to, actually enjoy the journey.
I get that. It's a common trap. We imagine ourselves crossing the finish line, but we don't always picture the steps it takes to get there.
So we end up feeling overwhelmed or discouraged when things get tough.
Exactly. But Keller says, instead of just visualizing that end goal, visualize the process, the actual steps it takes to get there.
So break down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Yes. And then visualize yourself successfully completing each one. Like, create a mental movie of yourself taking action, overcoming obstacles, and making progress.
I can see how that would be incredibly powerful. You're not just focusing on the destination, you're actually mapping out the route.
Exactly. And by visualizing the process, you build confidence, you stay motivated, and you avoid feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the goal.
Wow, these additional principles really add a whole new layer of depth to the one thing.
They do. It's like Keller is giving us a framework for not just achieving success, but also for living a more fulfilling and intentional life.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I'm walking away with so many valuable insights.
Me too. And I bet our listeners are feeling inspired to put all of this into action.
I hope so. But before we wrap things up, I want to pose a question to our listeners.
Okay, hit me with it.
Think about everything we've discussed today. The focusing question, the domino effect, the 6 lies, the 4 thieves, those additional key principles, all of it. Now, consider this. If you could only focus on one thing for the next month that would have the biggest positive impact on your life, what would it be?
Ooh, That's a powerful question.
It gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It does. And once you've identified your one thing, remember all those tools we talked about? Use the focusing question to clarify your priorities, create a plan to defeat those four thieves, and block off time in your schedule to actually work on your one thing.
No distractions allowed.
None. This is your time to make it happen.
I love it. So to our listeners, we challenge you. Find your one thing and go after it with everything you've got.
Because you've got this.
And we can't wait to hear about all the amazing things you achieve.
You know, it's amazing how much the one thing challenges, like our typical assumptions about productivity.
It really is a different way of thinking about things.
It's like we're so used to this idea of doing more, more, more.
Being more, having more, all at the same time.
Exactly. But Keller is all about simplifying, focusing on what truly matters.
It's almost like a minimalist approach to productivity.
It is. It's about stripping away all that excess and getting down to the essentials.
And I think that's why it resonates with so many people, because we're all feeling so overwhelmed these days.
Totally. We're constantly bombarded with information and demands on our time.
It's like we're all drowning in to-do lists.
And Keller's message about prioritizing and learning to say no, it's more relevant now than ever.
It's like he's giving us permission to set boundaries and protect our energy.
Which is something so many of us struggle with.
Big time. You know, it's not just about being more productive, it's about being more intentional with our lives.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
The one thing encourages us to align our actions with our values.
To focus on what brings us meaning and fulfillment.
It's not just about getting things done, it's about creating a life that we truly love.
Exactly. And that's what real success is all about.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
It really has.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on productivity.
Me too. And I hope our listeners feel the same way.
To our listeners, we encourage you to take everything we've discussed today and apply it to your own life.
Find your one thing.
Block off time to work on it.
Create those rituals that support your focus.
And watch the dominoes fall.
You got this.
And remember, the journey to achieving your goals, it's not always a straight line.
There will be bumps along the way.
But as long as you stay committed to your purpose and keep taking action, you'll get there.
One step at a time.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration of the one thing.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
We hope you're feeling inspired to unlock your full potential and achieve extraordinary results.
And remember, it's all about the one thing.
Until next time, happy focusing.